And then I wanted to mention that one of the issues that has consistently come up in discussions around housing in our own county, water supply. The Board of Supervisors on the 29th of July is going to have a presentation made by the two large water agencies that serve North Marin and Central and Southern Marin, MMWD and North Marin, to the Board of Supervisors that will lay out their 20-year water supply plans as required under state law and be available to talk to us about that. So if folks are interested in that, I just mentioned that to you. And I mention it partly because Friday, MTC's Planning Committee meeting of last Friday, the city's representative to ABAG, Pat Ecklund, was particularly harsh about Plan Bay area, complaining significantly about the loss of local control, about high-density housing, still questioning the numbers related to population, jobs, raising questions about whether vehicle miles traveled is a meaningful metric, and also speaking about her interest in some kind of sub-regional planning process, which I assume is what has been made available in the past for counties that want to tackle the RENA number and allocate it amongst their own jurisdictions rather than having it assigned at ABAG. I think that from my perspective as our representative on MTC, that a number of the criticisms really are misguided in that when we think about local control, which is really a fundamental piece of both SB 375 and the Plan Bay area, in Marin County, 4 different areas that had tentatively been or even actually been identified as priority development areas, we removed those designations based on the request from the local jurisdiction, and that's the way it's supposed to work. There's no question that we are walking away from funding opportunities because of that, but that's exactly the way it's supposed to work. The local communities decide whether they want to participate in these programs. If they don't, they know they're going to have to forego some of the funding opportunities that go with them. As far as the high density issues, I think that it's going to be every community's responsibility to figure out how to meet our housing needs. And we can use a wide range of building types. There's nothing being driven from the regional level on that. And as far as water supply, which she seemed to bring forward, I just would be inviting her as your representative of the cities and towns to participate in the discussion at our board to better understand the water supply issues. And I will also say this, that and I think it's valuable information. Her presentation, her perspective was not well received by the other commissioners, and there are some very pointed comments that were made by several of the commissioners. So I think we are beginning to experience some reaction to us as a county right now from the other parts of the region that feel like they want to go forward with their own engagement in these priority development areas, transit corridors, and their suggestion is, if you don't want it in your county, that's one thing, but don't make it difficult for us. And so I think it's important for us to know, what we face within the region based on a fair amount of criticism that still is going on in our own county, and I did want to bring that to the whole group's attention. I do think that there are ways for us to address that, but that's it on the go forward. And then under what I probably should have mentioned under Commissioner Matters not on the agenda was a suggestion that we may want to add a committee or commissioner report from our transit district. It's just a thought, but the transit district, 55% of our Measure A money goes into transit. It's in the process of doing a short-range transit plan right now that I think we'd all be interested in knowing how it's proceeding. And we've just undertaken a significant study of school bus service, which, as we know, is a major source of congestion, at least in the morning hours. And so it's just a thought to the chair that you might consider inviting a representative from the Transit District Board, perhaps the chair, Judy Arnold's the chair at the present time, to make a report. But I think keeping this body apprised of that one is just as important as these other committees.
Thank you. And I think it's a good suggestion. Yeah, okay.
Alice?
Yes.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
To the ABAG in the Plan Bay area. When the vote for the Plan Bay area took place at the ABAG meeting, Pat Ecklund is representative from MCCMC, and I'm making these comments in my former role as her alternate. Had not taken a consensus of the towns and cities when she made her determination on how she planned to place her vote. How she placed her vote, what she said, notwithstanding, I reminded her that she had to take a consensus vote and set a meeting up of the delegates from the different towns and cities to make sure she understood what the consensus was rather than what her own personal opinion may be. I feel that the comments that you may have heard that you commented on this meeting may have been more past personal opinions rather than reflecting any consensus of MCCMC. Because at the delegate meetings at which I attended, there was significant discussion with the ABAG representative, Brad Paul, the assistant executive director, on the desire from Marin to possibly develop a constructive caucus, so that as this next round of Plan Bay area goes forward, we don't have the conflict-based sort of encounters over these issues that I think were unnecessary. And I'll take as much responsibility as anybody representing Larkspur, but I think the towns and cities could have done with the county a much better job at showing what Plan Bay area should look like for Marin. And most of the issues surround compatibility. Mm-hmm. So I think Marin actually is a model for what Plan Bay area is trying to show others to do, in my opinion. And had, for example, just one simple illustration of the information we could have provided to the regional agency, just to increase the scope of the area in which you're looking at. They really were looking at a very narrow scoping area along 101, maybe even one property deep on each side in some cases. So I think that area needs to at least get back into the existing downtowns that string along that same corridor, so that more Marin-type solutions for these prototypes you mentioned might be developed. Often surface parking, not just structured parking. Because I think maintaining the patterns that exist here in the county and showing our version, our scale of that can be achieved, and I think all the same goals can be achieved, and maybe model for other areas that are having the same kinds of issues we're facing. So I think there's I'll just say a misunderstanding is often at the core of most problems like this. So let's define our understanding of how we might carry those goals forward as a suggestion. And that was really the message to creating a caucus of the towns and cities so that we could work more constructively with ABAG rather than fight them over.
Thank you. I want to just say that I think those points are right on, and I take it as the MTC commissioner for all of the cities and the county that and have shared this, and this information was shared very effectively, I think, on last Friday by Chair Spearing from Solano County, that we were not well served. There was a lot going on, but we were not well served by the public outreach and the fact that we had unknowledgeable facilitators in the meetings in local communities. And so we're right now in the process of putting together roundtables with local officials that will help to inform the public outreach and tailor it so that it can be much more context sensitive, if you will, to the local communities. And we'll be reaching out this fall before we begin even the public participation activities next spring. So I do appreciate those comments. And as to, you know, it's also helpful to hear you mention about the MC representation. Councilmember Ecklund was referring to both a meeting that she said she had organized for MC members, but she was specifically going back to a meeting that she was attending with the Citizen Marin group earlier in the week. And so I think that she, in some respects, is trying to incorporate their concerns into her comments at this time.
Well, my comments are more focused on so much reflecting what is heard at the meetings, because it's often quite emotional. I'm trying to describe what that bridge starts to need to, how we need to start building that bridge with this process, because the goal is to keep funding for the improvements that we have to take place here. And certainly show and strengthen our working relationship with the larger agencies, rather than, as you mentioned, we're starting to get a bad rap now because of some of the things that we should be managing better here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to that last point, Steve, I want to thank you for your report. And as the MCCMC president, I know that I've been in conversation with a number of people in this room about our relationship with ABAG and going forward. And so we know we have some work to do. And I guess I would call on the TAM reps to talk to your ABAG rep as one way to facilitate communication and feedback. And that we'll keep working to coordinate.
Great.
For Marin.
I promise this will be my final comment. But I think it's important to state at the meeting you mentioned that Pat, as ABAG organized to discuss planned area, what worked, what didn't, et cetera, and all the delegates were there, as were representatives from Citizen Marin. The most important thing, in my opinion, that took place at the meeting was the description of the concept and the desire to develop a Marin caucus that had a larger voice in the sustainable communities strategy discussion, as opposed to having our ad hoc committee merely reporting through back to our local jurisdictions. We should be allowed to make suggestions that better integrate what we're doing to the goals of the legislation. He thought it was Brad Paul, Executive Assistant Director of ABAG, thought it was a terrific idea. So I just want you to know that we had that support expressed directly from him at that meeting. So my takeaway from the meeting, as opposed to what you might have heard, was the essence of my perception of that meeting.
Great. Well, as our shared representative on MTC, I'm more than excited to hear that people would like to get more involved, like at this early stage, and I'll do what I can to be supportive of that.
Thank you.
And I would hope that if we're talking about a coalition, we're talking about a broader coalition, not only Citizen Marin, but other people in the county that may have a different perspective.
May I comment
That's my
on that?
concern with what I'm hearing.
Well, I think it ought to start with our delegates.
I did not attend that last meeting, but I did fill in for our representative on the prior meeting. And it was the ABAG representatives from the various cities in Marin. Brad Paul was there in addition, and then there were a couple of members of the public, one of whom I believe is a member of Citizen Marin. So I believe it's them making the effort to attend as members of the public. I don't believe that there is an effort to include them at the table. It is a table of ABAG representatives from each city rather than, any other organized group or advocates.
Well, the meeting Steve referred to that Pat Ecklund organized for the delegates, there were Citizen Marin representatives there. They sat at the table with everybody. Everybody's titles disappeared. We had a great discussion. Everybody was in support of this Marin caucus.
Okay.
idea.
But I think that was, Dan, that was one meeting prior.
Correct.
Right, that's what I said. So 2 meetings ago, I mean, it was, so maybe we need to clarify that before we jump to any conclusions about what role, Citizen Marin is having here, because my understanding is that, this group that's talking, that Pat Ecklund is bringing together to start these discussions. It's primarily the representatives from the city and then a few members from the public who show up.
Well, it was a
Okay.
great discussion. And we did
Good.
invite Corey Madera to join ABAG at the meeting.
I did not vote to drop out. I was outvoted. Perhaps it will come up again.